Hi, I'm Nick Leather, and this is Be Inspired for BBC Writers. When I was a kid, I worked out at a certain point that any anxieties or fears that I had, if I wrote them into a story, then that was quite a good way of dealing with it, you know. And that's what I'm still doing that. Do you know? That's it's even an anxiety of being on a train and being in that public space. And what if you were trapped here? I mean, you suddenly realise you can get 6 hours out of that, because that is, we all, I think, share a little bit of that anxiety, and I think it's quite a good start for writing. So that's what I did ever since I was a kid. Just try and just always loved making stories up and find it very satisfying. And actually, I don't find writing stressful at all. I find life is stressful. Writing is de-stresses. Do you know, forming it into a story is the thing that takes the stress away. Well, it's only when I'm writing that I haven't got a worry in the world. I didn't have a clue how to get into it, and in the end, I did do like a master's in script writing, which was really helpful and really good, because you get to sit and write. Sort of justify your writing, which I think helps. You know, it's quite hard to sit and write. It always looks a little bit like you're not doing anything when you're growing up. And yeah, I remember sitting in my room once and thinking I was going to write. I'd only been there 10 minutes and my mum came to check on me because she thought I was depressed. Because there's something about just sitting there without a telly on. Like, just sitting there with a pen, just thinking, what's wrong with him? That gave me reason to write. But I didn't know how to get in there, and I didn't have a master plan. Still not got a master plan. And then I went into the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester one day, and just because my dad told me to go in because he said it was an amazing building, and there was a poster up, and it said, on this big poster, it said, so you want to be a writer? ? And I thought, I do, yeah. What do I do? I'll go and get the details from that. And it was a competition. So I entered that competition. I was one of the winners of that competition, and that got me into the Royal Exchange. And I ended up I got onto something that was then called the Pearson Playwrights Scheme. I think now it's the Peggy Ramsey Film 4 scheme. And I was writing residence at the Royal Exchange Theatre for a year, and that was like really a training scheme for being a writer. It changed my life, absolutely changed my life in every way. And I got to go in the Exchange every day and see how it worked, and you get given an office and you get a commission as part of it, you know. Also got a wife as part of it, which I don't know is official part of the scheme, and they might have dropped that bit now, I don't know, but I did get a wife as part of it. That was marvellous. So it was great in every way for me. When I got into the Royal Exchange Theatre, I'd never been to the theatre in my life that wasn't through school, where I wasn't almost forced to go. I don't think I'd ever been through choice. And so that year, I fell in love with the theatre, because I just, you know, it properly was like an affair with the theatre. They were chucking plays at me, the history of theatre to read, and I was trying to fill in all these gaps, you know, and I loved it. But what I do know, I didn't know the theatre. What I do know is telly, because I put the hours in on telly, you know. And everything, all types of things as well. Like I always loved, you know, I've always loved a thriller and that. But you know, growing up, I loved sitcoms as well, and was really into all that. My dad, I guess it was the one thing of becoming a scriptwriter. My dad was into old radio comedy, and so we used to have books of scripts at home, which I look back now and go, that was quite unusual, I think, and quite rare. So when I was in primary school and you had reading time, 15 minutes reading time, I sat and read a book of scripts. And I remember my friend complaining to the teacher because he said, Nick Leather's not got a proper book. Miss, he's just reading a book, and it's just people talking. And he keeps laughing as well. And it's true, you know, look, when I'm doing it now, it's not a proper book of script, is it? So much easier to write. But so I'd always had that, and I think I've loved, so I had that awareness that there was something from being young called a scriptwriter, that someone created these things. And you know, I was then aware of the Coronation Street writers. You know, that was like my dad used to point out to me, and he'd go, oh, this is going to be a good episode, look who it is. This is John Stevenson or whatever. And that sort of fed into me that it actually makes a difference who writes things, you know, and it changes it. So I loved TV, and I felt that I completely knew TV and was at home in TV and would read about it. So I always had that idea that was where I would go. I didn't know how to get into telly, and I thought, I don't think this is going to work. I had a meeting once. This is really good advice to people, because it's what not to do. And then it kind of worked out, but don't do it. And I had a meeting with a producer called Tony Wood at Line Pictures, and I said to him, I was there to pitch an idea to him, and halfway through, I wouldn't say I had a meltdown, but I just got a bit despairing. And I said, the problem is, in the theatre, they gave me a bursary, and they gave me an office, and they gave me a commission, and that's how I got into the theatre, and I learnt everything about the theatre, but I've just realised that no one's ever going to do that in TV, that's not going to happen, is it? And I went home, and when I got home, I got an email from Tony's PA that said, Tony says your office will be ready on Monday. So that's what I did. I went to Line Pictures as their writer in residence and learnt about telly. I should say before all that the one thing I had done in TV was through BBC Writers' Room. And so the first time I was ever paid for writing something, writing a script for the screen, was a BBC Writers' Room competition, which did get me in, and I went on a BBC Writers' Room radio writers course. That was my start there. But yes, Tony gave me that office, and the idea that I'd pitched very badly with my despairing approach, actually in the end became a children's TV series on CBBC. So that pitch, and he still must have seen something in the pitch as well. But I did, while I was there, I did an episode of Hollyoaks every 8 weeks while I was there. So I justified my desk by typing away. And then I came up with my own ideas, and he encouraged me to do that. And I did Hollyoaks until that children's series happened, and then I went off and did that. Resilience, because think for various reasons things are changed at the last minute there. So you have to don't panic, don't be despairing. You actually have to just sit down and be very professional about it. So I have been there where they said an actor didn't turn up today, and we have to shoot with scenes, so you have to rewrite those scenes without this actor, but we've already shot some scenes with the actor that are going to be in between those. So can you make a new strand work where a character walks from one room into the other, but he's never going to get there? So I have to then write a scene where we go into that room, and I've got the window open, and he's gone out of the window, and it actually becomes a bit of a mystery. All this was only done very practically because someone did not come to work that day because they were not well. Before that, I would never have thought of doing anything like that. Actually, I do love the technical challenge of it. I really love that thinking, okay, this is what I've got, how can I work around it? And sometimes you're right, I think you can write some really good stuff from those challenges, because you almost, you click into a different gear. And sometimes we can spend too much time thinking about things when the development process is so long. Actually, there's something great about, you've got to write this today because we're filming this tomorrow. And I really enjoyed that in continuing drama. The other thing, the great thing, was pitching. I'd never had the same pressure on pitching of being in a story room where there's 30 people and you have to tell them a story. Well, look, we can all convince ourselves that we've come up with the best story in the world and think it's not fair that it's not been on the telly and no one's made it. Actually, if you have to pitch it to 30 people, there's no point saying it's the best story in the world, because 30 people will not pretend to be interested or entertained if it's not the best story in the world. And nothing helped my story creation more than desperately wanting to grip 30 people in a room and wanting to bring them in and wanting that story ultimately to happen and be made, and it really made me think about it, and that sort of strengthened my story muscle of, well, I need to turn this up. I need to make my story more surprising, and because otherwise they're going to start looking out the window or something. The memorable characters are the key to the story, the key to drama, and we can sometimes forget that, because once we've worked on our story and we're happy with it, sometimes you can let the characters be a bit functional. Or you might focus on your lead character, and all these other characters are just a little bit facilitating their story, And I think the key thing is you want people to have their own story. So when I started at the beginning and said, I started with Nightsleeper with that series of what ifs, and that created that story. And it almost created the story of the train. And then I think, well, I know there's going to be lots of passengers on that train. Who am I going to build it around? Because if I try and write this story around 12 people on a train, it's going to be hard for us as an audience to latch on. So I'm going to focus on one person on the train, and then once they've provided our spine, then I'm going to go out and work out what's going on with the rest of them. So I think about that central character, and all the time I'm thinking, for any character, what's their objective and what's the obstacle? And I think that's what everyone has to start by thinking. What does that character want? And what gets in the way of what they want? And that really, as soon as I thought of that for that lead character, anyone will see when they watch episode 1, it will become clear that our lead character's objective is maybe not what we thought it was. And that gave me story. And actually, then it made him an interesting character, because you realise that he had a secret, when that objective was different. And suddenly, I think, if you start working, then as I build the world out, you think of all characters like that how do they present and who are they really, then they start to become more and more interesting, And I think it's, I like the idea that everyone could look at the train and see who they themselves might be on that train and how they might react. I love creating those characters who we can read ourselves into, and make them try and find that gap between who they seem to be and who they actually are, what they appear to want and what they really want. I think interesting characterization is the gap between the two. Do always be thinking about what the character wants, because beyond anything else, that this goes into a good scene. Sometimes the scenes can feel just like it's almost like a unit of information, and that's like a heavy scene to write, but a heavy scene to watch. It doesn't grip you. Whereas actually, the scene should be powered by what the character wants, and what gets in the way, what they do to try and get what they want, what they do to try and overcome that obstacle, and what tactics they have to come up with, the way they negotiate it, and then when they get past it, or maybe it makes things better, maybe it gets them closer to what they want, or maybe it actually gets them further away. So suddenly this creates its own story, and they think they're going to get closer, but no, it's had the opposite effect. To all the time just be thinking about that, the objectives and obstacles, and yes, you might be writing a big crazy train thriller, like this, where the objectives, the obstacles, the swerves, and those turns are going to be big. Or you might be writing something that's a relationship drama. You might be writing a factual drama. The same rules always apply. And when I'm building a story, I always think if you're writing your story out, and so I would start off, say, for instance, I'm trying to work out what my story is in one sentence. That's my starting point. And again, in terms of sometimes feeling guilty writing, I think we can all write too much, because you feel as if you get to the end of the day and you've got 10 pages that you've done really well and worked hard, and that's impressive. You don't need 10 pages. One good sentence is a great day. I think that's really hard to think about that as a writer, because it doesn't feel a lot. Well, there will be 10 pages worth of discarded sentences behind that, so you've still done the same work, but if you've got one good sentence, that could be a TV series. That's a starting point for a TV series. You really want to get that right. And then I'll break that one sentence down into 4 sentences. And if I've got 4 good sentences, I've probably got an hour's TV now. I wish I'd have known that at the beginning. That I could, 4 good sentences will probably give me an hour's TV. If I've got 24 good sentences, I've got a TV series. That think of it that way, and because you're really looking at for each good sentence, almost like an act or a part of the story, and break it down like that. And how are we turning it at each time? Just keep turning it. And a good test of those sentences, I think, when you're working out the story, is if the sentence could begin with an and, then it might be a bit boring story-wise. But if the sentence should begin with a but, then suddenly it becomes interesting in terms of story. I think all the time I'm just obsessed. Where's the but in the story? Because the but is the obstacle, isn't it? The but is the thing that gets in the way. The character does this, but this happens. But he does this to try and get past it. But then this happens, and you can, so you don't literally have to include the buts. It's just that the buts are there in your head all the time. Think about the sentence needs a but. I think what I love about TV is that I'm not very inarticulate, and the amazing thing about script writing is I think it's a bonus, because you're writing about real people and the way they speak, and often they will struggle to say what they want to say. And when I started writing that, and started writing dialogue, and started writing these real people, I just really felt empowered by that. And I would say to anyone, don't feel intimidated by writing scripts, because or don't think that you have to be some sort of playwrighty type person, because you don't. In script writing, inarticulacy is often king, I think, because most of us find it hard to express ourselves, and you never have to. You don't write in sentences. Sometimes I think bad dialogue is written in sentences. You write in breaths and snatches, and I almost never finish a line in life or in a script, and I love writing like that. I think it has its own kind of power and sort of beauty to it. So I always feel that whoever you are, you can make the most of that in dialogue. And the final thing I would say, that if I was giving a top tip to someone as a writer, is be you. Because sometimes there'll be something we like on telly, and we'll watch it, and particularly when you're starting, and you try and write your own version of that, or not even your own version, a version of that. Well, what production companies are looking for all the time is not just good scripts, and they are always looking for good scripts, but they're looking for voices as well. And whoever you are, whatever your voice is, it will be unique to you. So use your voice. Don't try and take on someone else's voice. Be you. If you then go and work on a continuing drama, well, you'll put your voice aside and you'll write in the voice of that show. But for your own stuff, for your spec script, use your voice. And beyond anything else, I think when people are still like, how do I get into TV? And how do I do it? And thinking somehow that there must be some magic person to meet who can get you in there. And actually the spec script is probably, always was and always will be king. So spend all your time on getting that one script, whether it's 30 pages, 60 pages, whatever it is. You don't need second episodes or anything like that. And say, it doesn't have to be 60 pages, it could just be 30 pages. But that story that's in your voice, that has a beginning, a middle and an end, that turns that story, that shows that you can do it, that has some originality to it and is surprising, that's the thing that will get you into the business. That's the thing that will get you a career. Spend all your time focusing on that. I love films as well. And actually, sometimes now, TV series become work because I watch for work. I love watching a film more than ever because I love the fact I've got so many of my own question marks in my head, story question marks. Sometimes I'm like, oh, don't let any other question marks get in my head, because I don't want a question mark, I want a full stop. And the great thing about film is that we get a full stop. So if I could start with some films like Billy Liar, Loneliness, Long Distance Runner, you know, and why I would advise anyone to do radio as well. Then I wrote a radio play and got to get Tom Courtney in it, because you can do these things with radio, you know. It's great when you get your heroes. You Can Count on Me, but then more popular ones like Big is one of my favourites. I think if you look at it's really interesting if you look at Big in terms of the character journeys, because Tom Hanks's journey is good actually. Elizabeth Perkins' journey is, you suddenly realise that's the spine of the film. It's her film. I didn't realise that until I watched it a few times. She's got a fantastic journey. He's almost just a metaphor for what she goes through. You know, it's great. I'm saying about loving thrillers. I love, as a guilty pleasure, like an action film. So I love something like Air Force One or that damn thing. If I'm trying to, on a Saturday night, if I'm trying to forget about something, that's absolutely my go-to, you know, or Twisters, that sort of thing. TV series, I've loved watching The Bear, the first couple of series of The Bear, and I'm really, you know, really into that and what that's doing. Do you know, some of my favourite series as well are older ones like Edge of Darkness. It's sort of amazing thing, a very British coup. You know, they would be ones that I would definitely be on my desert island, absolutely. GBH, and I love Jimmy McGovern, and you know, I would take anything by Jimmy as well.